It's no secret that Arsonist Firewall is the strongest minion build currently, and this version of the build, I believe, is the strongest. I killed the Breach boss playing this build. I was able to face tank every mechanic while doing insane damage to him. And if you look at this clip here, you can see how this build is able to do over 200,000 DPS in single target. This is not just a normal boss in this clip. This is a tier 15 map boss with a +1 map level and with 2 +1 boss difficulties from the Atlas. This dude has millions of health, and in that clip I did 1.2 million damage in 6 seconds. And you might be wondering, how is this build so freaking tanky that I can face tank mechanics from uber bosses in the endgame while also doing enough damage to absolutely annihilate endgame bosses? And the answer for the damage component is crit. So a lot of builds right now are using random scepters for things like, extra warriors or random things like that. But if you instead just run Malice, Malice is going to increase your base crit chance of your minions from 5% to 10%. And then that is going to be multiplied by all of your crit chance for your minions. And then that is all going to be multiplied by your crit damage for all your minions. And the end result is loads of damage, very consistently, very fast, very high. This is an incredibly powerful combination. And when you look at the passive tree, because of the types of routing we're going to be taking, we're actually find ourselves routing very close to crit very often. So if you look down here, for instance, at this 20% crit chance node that also gives 15% damage, this is exactly where we want to be pathing so we can get access to these armor and ES nodes. And you're going to see as we get into more of the build why the build is so tanky is largely because it is able to play armor ES, and I'll explain all of that in a moment. But, we're getting the crit from down there, we're getting crit from here, crit, 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 we're getting so much crit chance and so much crit damage, it ends up multiplying the overall damage of our minions by about 40%. And that's a 40% multiplier these other builds are just straight up missing out on. Now, if you do opt out of crit, you do get some extra points you can put into other stuff, but honestly, there's not really much you can put points into to scale minion damage besides crit. Now, you can do a max life stacking because they do % max life, but this ends up being less overall damage than crit. Now, defensively, we are absolutely abusing Altered Flesh in its entirety. So Altered Flesh is going to make it so that we take a percentage of cold damage as fire, percentage of lightning as fire, and % of physical as chaos. Let's start with the % physical as chaos, because this is extremely important to understand why armor is so freaking good in this build. So 20% of the physical damage we take will be instead taken as chaos, and then we have 75% chaos reduction, right? So even though we're an ES build, so this chaos damage will get doubled, we're then mitigating that by 75%, and the end result is you end up taking about half as much damage as you would have from that 20%. So we're already mitigating that chunk. Then our loyal Hellhound is going to be taking in 20% of the damage as well, and it's all going to be going on to him, and he's of course incredibly tanky and is very, very rarely going to die. So it's another 20%, so we end up mitigating 40% of damage from physical hits. That means our armor is ludicrously effective. If you aren't familiar, armor mitigates heavier the bigger it is compared to the amount of damage you're taking. So by mitigating 40% of the damage before our armor is applied, we're able to mitigate an incredible amount of damage. I can kind of just stand around and get auto-attacked by mobs, and I'm not really going to die. And when you pair that with a shield with block chance, you can see the base block value of my shield is 42%. So that means that, when I get hit by an auto attack, the damage is getting split into like 5 different places. Then the remaining small number is blocked by my armor. And even to get there, it first has to get through my 42% block chance on my shield. This build is very, very tanky against physical damage. And what's great about it is that because we're stacking armor, we are going to be able to utilize something to absolutely destroy elemental damage as well. But first, remember, cold damage getting converted to fire, lightning damage converted to fire, right? Those are the other 2 elements. So what we're able to do is we're able to get maximum fire resistance on our shield, and eventually we're also going to be looking to get maximum resistance on our shield, maximum elemental resistance. So we're going to be able to get plus 3% from this, and we're able to get plus 1% from this node up here, enhanced barrier. We're getting another 1%, and the result is that we will eventually get to 79%. Currently I'm at 78, which is very good. So 78% fire damage reduction, and we're converting, the other elements into it. Very powerful, but this becomes absolutely insane with heat proofing. So heat proofing is going to make it so 25% of our armor is also applied to any fire damage that we take. Because, we're taking 20% of the damage from lightning, converting that into fire, so it's a very small number already. Then we're mitigating 78% of that small number, so it's getting even smaller. Then we're applying our armor to that small number, and you can see how this just gets out of control really fast. So we have tons of max resistance for dealing with fire damage itself, plus we have heat proofing. Then we're converting the other elements into fire, so we're getting the extra resistance there, and we're converting that, doing all that. Physical damage, we have crazy DR, and so you can see like physical damage, lightning damage, cold damage, fire damage, we are crazy DR against. Now, chaos damage does wreck this build. The chaos damage is the biggest weakness of the build. The way we deal with that is getting insane amounts of barrier, of energy shield. So, for starters, we are playing Be It Its Hand. This is a very important piece of the build, as we're going to convert 25% of our life into a less amount of energy shield. But because we have so much maximum energy shield in the build, this ends up being a huge survivability increase. You can see right now, sitting in town, I have 3.4k maximum ES, which on its own is pretty good, right? 1400 life, 3.4k ES. This means that we're sitting at 4800 HP. Not bad, but this gets significantly better when playing with Grim Feast. Grim Feast is going to make it so whenever we kill an enemy, or one of our minions dies, but this rarely happens. So essentially, whenever we kill an enemy, it has a 50% chance to drop a thing on the ground, and if we pick up the thing, we gain 576 energy shield. That 576 can overcap up to double our base energy shield. We are running around the map with a horde of minions. Minions are going to make it so we very rarely get hit, which means we're going to be constantly picking up ES, and when we do get hit, we are generally going to be sitting at over 8,000 total life. It is very rare to not be sitting at 8,000 life, as you can see from the gameplay. Now, against boss fights, this is generally not going to do very much. It'll help at the very start of a boss fight, because you're going to get in with this thing fully ramped. But against boss fights, this isn't as strong, but you can see I'm still face tanking boss mechanics, no problem at all. It's not an issue. However, when mapping, having a 100% uptime on doubling your energy shield cap essentially is absolutely broken. So what we're able to do is we're able to stack maximum life, stack strength because we're trying to wear armor, and then we're converting that life into ES, and then that ES is being multiplied by the billion percent ES nodes that we're able to take, and then that number is getting doubled at the very end of all of that by Grim Feast, and this build ends up just being stupidly tanky. And it is just stupid how tanky this build is. I've been farming tier 15 maps. I've been Val orbing them, which means that I'm doing 6 mod tier 15 maps, and I'm just running around like an absolute beast. Putting heat proofing onto my necklace has made me so unbelievably tanky, it is almost impossible to die. So that is the core of the survivability, and it is just incredible. Now, while we're on the topic of survivability, I do want to talk a little bit about bossing, because in bossing, our energy shield generation is quite different compared to when we are mobbing. So, Adamant Recovery is going to be the core resource that we use for regenerating our energy shield. This is going to make it so that all of our percent armor nodes actually apply to energy shield recharge rate. So we're going to end up getting around 65 or 80% energy shield recharge rate. I can't remember the exact number right now. I calculated it before. But this node is going to give us about 65 or 80% energy shield recharge rate, which means this node is enough to be our main source of energy recharge when we're bossing. Now, on our jewels, we are able to pick up faster start of energy recharge rate, and our jewels are actually a large part of what enables this passive tree. And they're a very important piece here, because they're going to be paying for our start of energy recharge rate, because this is really important against bosses to have some of this stat. And by putting it onto jewels, we're actually able to be much more efficient with our passive points. And the other thing we're able to do with our jewels is we're able to run minion elemental resistance. So one of the big problems with minion pathing on the passive tree is that if you want to get the elemental resistance for your minions to be tanky enough to really live, you're generally going to have to go way out of your way, over here to get living death, or up into here to get regenerative flesh. But with this route, we're able to get 3 jewel sockets, and each of the jewel sockets we can run 10% minion all res, so we're getting 30% minion all res. Then we're able to run crit on these. We're able to run faster start of energy charge rate, and you're able to see why this build is able to utilize these jewels to really min-max the passive tree and become way more efficient in terms of points. This build is very, very point hungry. Before we move on, I do want to say that this build is going to get a lot better once I'm able to run B at its will. This is going to be about a 30% damage increase. Unfortunately, my game is bugged and I cannot do the ascendancy. I literally crash every single time that I try. I submitted a ticket, I tried everything, I try every time a new patch comes out, but for now, it is what it is. But for you guys, if you're able to get this build is going to be even better. Now, for the remainder, the next things that we need to talk about are going to be the most important stats on gear. This build is very stat hungry and stats have incredible power in this build. So on our weapon, the most important thing is going to be minion skills. Minion skill levels scale ridiculously hard. You're getting a 10% multiplier per skill rank, and you're going to be increasing their health by 10%. And because they do percent health damage, this is incredibly powerful. So one thing I do want to mention, it is very important on your skeletal arsonist to apply quality gems, because they're going to do bonus damage based on their maximum health, and this works. Even though you have to tab over to their command skill, this does actually work. They are doing percent max health damage on their auto attacks. So it's very important to get minion ranks on your weapon. Second most important stat is spirit, and that stat is also extremely important. And then your third and fourth most important stats are going to be double crit. After that, just look for some add damage. On our helmet, we definitely need to get ranks of minion skills. This is super important. After that, we're going to be looking to max out our resistances. This is the second most important thing. If you don't cap out your resistances, this build does not work nearly as well. This build is very reliant on getting resistances up. One of the things I can tell you, though, to kind of cheat a little bit, is that you can run charms to get easy access to high amounts of resistance, and charms actually have very good uptime. Because this build does so much damage, you're going to be clearing maps very quickly, meaning you're able to keep up charms very easily. When it procs, it's going to last for 5 seconds, and it's going to recharge in about like 8 to 10 seconds, something like that, typically, and it's able to run 2 charges. So this thing is up anytime you need it. So definitely look to use these to fill in your resistance gaps. But yeah, on your helmet, you're looking for minion skills, double res, and then maximum life after that. And then what's really good is to get increased armor and ES. On our chest piece, I love this base because this base has up to 30 spirit on it implicitly. That's a lot of extra spirit. And we can also roll spirit onto the item itself. And you can see my chest piece is actually pretty mid currently. But what we're going to be looking for is, like, you know, that spirit roll, some resistances, some main stat if you need it, and then some boost to armor ES on the item itself. Most important thing, again, gets a resistance cap, and then look for spirit. Yeah, so on the belt, this belt is fantastic. So because this belt has implicit armor, and then I rolled armor onto it, I have loads of extra armor from this belt, plus it has triple resistance, which is perfect, maximum life. The only thing is I wish that mana was an extra charm slot. That would be completely crazy, but that's where we're at right now. On your gloves, and okay, one thing I do want to point out though, before we move on actually, is that strength and int stats are very important. You need to make sure that you're having enough strength and int to wear your current gear and use your gems. So on all of these pieces of gear, your highest priority is going to be getting your strength and int so you can actually use your items. Then it's going to be resistances, and then it's going to be all this minion stuff, right? So for instance, like on your chest piece, if you aren't able to wear your gear, prioritize strength or intelligence, whatever you need, before you prioritize spirit, for instance. And it's going to be the same thing on the gloves. You get whatever stats you need on your gloves for your build to function, then prioritize resistances, then maximum life, and then bonuses to armor and ES. On boots, movement speed is super important, and then once again, resistances, maximum life, percent armor, yes. You know, you guys are probably picking up on the pattern here. Now, what breaks a little bit from that pattern is your shield, where you need to get maximum resistance, specifically to fire, and you also really want percent block chance, because this block chance percentage is applying to the shield's innate block, which is an insane multiplier for block. This is very good, and it's how we're able to get so much block chance so easily. And again, maximum life is incredible. Another tip, by the way, for getting into your resistance caps is to fill in with your runes. You can actually swap. If you come over here, you can actually get Artificer Orbs for pretty cheap. So for one Exalt Orb, I can get 4 Artificer Orbs. Each of those is going to represent 12% resistance to any element I want. So this is pretty damn good. Throwing on sockets on gear, adding in your resistances, that's going to help a lot, along with charms. Just get resistances however you can. You can get them for the bases on rings, on your necklace. You can get some more resistances. Oh yeah, we haven't talked about the necklace, have we? So we need to put heat proofing on the necklace. This is very important. It currently costs about 13 exalts to do this. You're going to be able to get to tier 15 maps without it. I've been farming tier 15 maps for days without it. But now that I'm pushing into 6 mod tier 15 maps, and I'm starting to do tier 16s and starting to do the uber bosses, heat proofing is essential. This is a very important thing. But, it's very expensive. It's kind of lower on the priority list. Getting your resistances, getting ranks to minion skills, very important. Spirit, very good. So next we need to talk about our support gems and our skills. So for our Hellhound, we're going to be running fire exposure. This is very, 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 very important because fire exposure is going to reduce enemy resistances by 20%, and then we're able to buff that by an additional 30%. So we're going to be reducing their fire resistance by about 26% just from this guy. So anyone who has resistance, you're shredding 26%, so it's crazy damage. And if they don't have resistance, it's just a straight 26% multiplier for your dudes, because your arsonists are going to be doing primarily fire damage. This is very important. We're also going to be running Meat Shield to increase his life pool. This will increase the ignite damage, which isn't really the point. The main point is we need him to live so that he can keep giving us that 20% damage reduction. We're also going to be running Wildfire, which will allow the ignite to spread, and it'll make it so it just has a little bit more AoE to it. On our Pain Offering, we're running Font of Rage so that we can give Rage to our Arsonists so that they can do even more damage. We're giving this Persistence so it lasts longer, and then we're running Ablation to increase the effect by 30%. Now, technically, you can run Increased Limit on Pain Offering, and if you really want to get some sick clips of doing absurd damage, Increased Limit is super, super sick on Ablation. On Pain Offering. But I find it's very annoying to use, and if you sacrifice 2 minions and then the boss does an AoE attack and instantly kills your Pain Offerings, your clip is going to be completely ruined. You're going to have 2 minions dead, and you're going to be in a bad spot. One Pain Offering with duration is great. The limit, reducing the duration by 50%, and you have to sacrifice 2 minions, I think is too expensive for general use. Now, on our Cleric, we're going to be running Arcane Tempo. I love running 2 clerics. The reason is because 1 cleric doesn't heal himself, but 2 clerics seem to. I can't get this 100% confirmed, but it seems like if you have 2 clerics, they'll heal each other, even though they normally can't heal themselves. If you give them 25% attack speed, they're going to be constantly spamming heals. Then we give them Last Gasp, so after they die, they live for 4 more seconds, getting out those heals, getting out those reses. And yeah, running 2 guys means you get more reses. It just feels a lot more consistent. Now, Flame Wall is a very important piece of the build because this is going to add about 17% damage to all of your minions' attacks. That's 17% not including the life, so it's probably more like 10% once you factor in the maximum life damage. But this is a very important piece. 10% damage is quite good. And we're going to be running Fortress on it, which will make it into an AoE, like a circle, which makes it much easier to get it where you want it to be. And then we're running Spell Cascade, which is going to make it ripple, multicast, so you're going to be covering the whole screen, so no matter where your minions are, they're going to be throwing through Flame Wall. Pretty nice little damage buff. I think it's definitely worth running. Flammability is incredibly powerful. This is a curse that's going to reduce their elemental resistance by 36%. And when you combine this with the dog, you can start to see how this is so strong. We are shredding an insane amount of resistance, which means we're able to deal with maps where enemies have extra resistances, and if they don't have extra resistances, then we have a huge damage multiplier. I'm running Focus Curse on this, so it casts 30% faster, and then I'm also playing Heightened Curse, which will increase the effect by 25%. Incredibly powerful. Now, I forgot to even mention Detonate Dead earlier. I think Detonate Dead is incredibly strong. I'm going to talk about it after the Arsonist. I think Detonate Dead is criminally underplayed right now. Let's start with the Arsonist. So the Arsonist is insanely powerful. It's just the best minion, period. In part because it costs very low spirit, in part because its base damage is crazy high, and in part because when you use your quality orbs on it, you're going to make him do max health damage. This is crazy strong. Like 50 or 60% of the damage he does is from gem quality. That's my rough napkin math. I could end up, you know, maybe it's higher or lower or whatever. But that's roughly what it is. It is insanely strong. You need to put quality gems on your arsonist. We're going to be running scatter shot because the grenades are an explosion, so this is going to give you a shotgun effect. And then we're going to be running immolate because the Hellhound is igniting everything. So we're getting a 30% damage multiplier. Then we're running Minion Mastery and Fire Mastery. This is going to add +2 levels to our dude, and because that scales damage by 10% and health by 10%, that is we're like getting 2 factors of damage for the minion, and we're increasing their health so they live longer. I love running Fire Mastery plus Minion Mastery. It's very powerful. Also, Martial Tempo, very good, 25% attack speed. This makes them much better for farming while also giving them a 25% damage multiplier. The increased attack speed means they're more rapidly going to hit enemies and kill them faster, obviously, but it's also going to give them a damage multiplier in sustained damage fights. Now, let's talk about one of my favorite things. I can't believe I didn't mention this until now, but Detonate Dead. I love Detonate Dead. This ability is crazy, man. Like, once your minions are dead, and it's you versus the enemy, bro, and you've got Detonate Dead, you are winning. It is so freaking strong. And it's so strong because it's doing max health damage. So whenever you target a corpse, it's going to explode and do max health damage. And then because we're getting a little bit of spell damage at the start of the tree, about 30%, we're going to be scaling that 20% quite a bit. And because of Malice, we're also going to have an increased crit chance with it. So chance to do double damage is actually going to be pretty decent. It's about 23% chance to do double damage, not bad. And then we're giving it increased area of effect. We're giving it spell echo, so it casts again with even more area. And then we're running considered casting for another damage multiplier. So we're multiplying the percent damage with blah blah blah. This does a lot of damage. You kill one rare mob, you Detonate Dead on it, and everything on the screen just explodes. It is so freaking good. I love this skill. And there's so many situations where, like, your minions get stuck on a wall, or like something weird happens and your minions can't DPS, or the mobs are scattered all over the place and the minions are trying their best, but, like, you know, they're only hitting a certain area. Detonate Dead just hits everything indiscriminately. That's part of what makes this version of the build so much better for farming than other versions that people are covering, is because Detonate Dead is literally just an overpowered skill. It is so freaking good. Finally, we get to Grim Harvest. And Grim Harvest is very important piece of the build for mapping specifically. Technically, you can drop it against bosses if you want to for more minions. I think that's totally acceptable to do. I'm currently running it, and then I also have extra spirit right now, so I'm running clarity on it. If you don't have the extra spirit for clarity, don't do it. You know, if you can run an arsonist instead, it's not worth dropping an arsonist for spirit. But, you know, for me, it's worth it because I've got 10 extra spirit. So, but yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. I love this build. It is so freaking strong. It is the definite current meta game for the minion. You know, the arsonist is anyway. And I think that this version of the build is currently one of the strongest out there. I definitely recommend you guys try it out. I'm not saying it's going to be the best minion build in a week, you know, when we learn more stuff. But for right now, this for me is my top minion pick. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed the build. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.